Be sure to subscribe to WXOU Sports on YouTube. WXOU Sports is the place to be for all things sports from your favorite college radio station. WXOU Sports features live audio broadcasts of all Oakland University home games, including men's and women's basketball. They also feature interviews with athletes and coaches, with highlights and more. Just go to YouTube and search WXOU Sports and hit subscribe. Now, back to the show. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the GioMoShow, your home for all Oakland University Golden Grizzlies sports, the only show of its kind that covers the Oakland Golden Grizzlies each and every week. My name is GioMoShow. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the GioMoShow to help support the podcast. Basketball is right here. We're in the middle of it. We're getting into the conference part of the season with still some of the fun trips outside of the conference. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. You can also follow the GioMoShow on Instagram. It's got its own page dedicated to it at the GioMoShow. And you can follow me on Twitter as well at GioMoSherry, WXOU. And you can use the hashtag the GioMoShow to get involved with the show on every social media platform. And today, if you're watching it right now, it's Christmas Eve. We release the show on Tuesdays, and it happens to be when Christmas Eve has arrived. And if you guys aren't watching it on YouTube, then you're robbing yourself of the beautiful sight of the Christmas sweater that I got going on. It's Gingerbread Men is the theme for this year. Oh, snap is what it reads on it for those who wanted to know what it said if you're dedicated to listening to it just on the podcast. But we'll make this one a little bit quicker, and luckily for us, it's just basketball, so we get to save a little bit of time so that you guys can get going on your holiday. We had games for both men's and women's, and we'll start with the men's this time because I'm fresh off of watching last night's game against Loyola Chicago, so I'm ready to go. I'm fired up to talk about men's basketball, but we still got a little bit to talk about before we get into that game in the Maui Invitational. We go back to Tuesday the 17th at Little Caesars Arena, where the Oakland Golden Grizzlies took on the Michigan State Spartans, 20th in the country. Some rank them as high as 15, but as of the day that we were playing them at LCA, they were the 20th team in the country, according to the Associated Press. 77-58 was the final score. Michigan State getting the 23rd win in a row in the matchup history between them and the Golden Grizzlies. And this one was a lot of fun despite the final score. So for those of you who missed last week, I was on the call on WXOU Sports along with Justin Shepard. We were in Little Caesars Arena right above the tunnel, got a great corner view of the action, and I got to do play-by-play of Oakland and Michigan State. So it was a lot of fun for all of those reasons. I'll get into that in a little bit more. But as far as the game was concerned, so both teams went into this one, like I mentioned in last week's preview, similar teams where defense was their strongest part, and the rebounding was a better part of their skill set, but the shooting was not. Michigan State has been struggling relatively in their offense. The three-point shooting, they were about 27% for the season up to this point. Oakland was similar, but still you give it to, it's all relative to their conference. Obviously, Michigan State up higher in the totem pole at the Big Ten, Oakland Horizon League. But, relative to their homes, teams had similar struggles to it. 8-2 on the season, 2-10 in Big Ten play, and only one of their four starters from last year is returning to this game. They got four players in total returning from last year's matchup. So that's all the stuff that we went through last week in the preview edition of this game. But before we get into the game flow and the actual play on the court, I want to take a moment to address why we play this game, why Oakland plays this game, because I heard on the local radio, as I tune in, I like to stay tuned in to stuff around the area, and I could tell there was a disconnect between why Oakland plays this game against Michigan State. Why does Campy line up to get his butt whooped every year? Why do they bother playing this? Oakland fans, why do we even bother? It's embarrassing. Like, let's slow down a little bit. And I could tell that there's a lot of surface level understanding to it, but not so much any deeper. But luckily, I know a little bit deeper, and I'll help you guys understand that as well. So as Campy was saying in the post-game press conference, the game is not about him. It's not about the record. It's not about getting the win in the non-conference. It's about the players and giving them the opportunity to play basketball at the highest level in the state of Michigan. You get to be in Little Caesars Arena, which is what can't be called the Mecca of basketball in the state of Michigan. And of course, when they played at the Palace of Auburn Hills, it was the same deal, home of the Detroit Pistons. That is the highest level of basketball that you can find against the highest level of college basketball that you can find in the state of Michigan in the Michigan State Spartans. Can't be referring to them as the blue blood of the state. There's a blue blood program in all of college basketball. So it's about giving his players that opportunity on the biggest stage to have exposure to the rest of the country, as this one was broadcasted to ESPN2 and WXOU. But it's to give them that exposure, and it's to make memories. Hey, I played at Little Caesars Arena, maybe once, maybe twice, but I played in this big stage. So for Campy, that's what the game is about. And another point to address was how friendly Campy and Izzo were, especially in the post-game press conference where they were there together. Campy kind of came in early in the middle of Izzo's press conference, but before he was done finishing. So the both of them were in their matching Grinch sweaters, talking to each other for the post-game press conference. Izzo was asking Campy questions in regarding to what happened in the second half and stuff, because these guys aren't that good. These guys meaning the reporters that were in the room. But, that is a real friendship. This is also stuff we discussed with Griffin Beers on the men's basketball game reviews. You guys can go and check that out. But that's a real friendship between the two of them. And it's not so much like Campy is just a gracious loser in this matchup and Izzo's a gracious winner. Like, no, they are genuine friends, and they have fun doing this. They have fun putting on the show. They have fun giving kids the opportunity. And for Izzo's perspective, it's also one of the reasons they play is that a lot of fans in the Detroit area don't always get to go up and make the 2-hour some drive to East Lansing to see them in the Breslin Center. So to have a game being played at Little Caesars Arena gives those fans a chance to see their Spartans. So it's not as much about the result that matters for this matchup. This is the nature of college sports where you have such a big talent gap, resource gap between a lot of programs, and sometimes you just get this matchup that's pretty much, it was close at times, but pretty much impossible to win for the school on the lower end of things. So what it's actually about is just having fun. It's about, making memories. It's about putting on a good show, and it's about people just having a good time, having an excuse to go downtown and see a game and, just have some fun. That's what I think this game is about. And it's always fun that it's around Christmas because we get the Christmas sweaters and stuff. And, there's a little bit more festivity to it. And it's just fun. Can we just have fun? Can something just be fun? Especially when it's in the non-conference. For Oakland, the non-conference is only a place to battle test yourself so you could get ready for the conference season. Michigan State could get into the tournament without winning the Big Ten. Oakland cannot get into the tournament without winning the Horizon League. So it's different. So I just want everyone to kind of understand that this is something for fun. Can we have that? Is that allowed? It's Christmas time. Can we be jolly about basketball? That's what I want to get across here. So with all of that being said, let's get now to the game flow of it. So the first half was much different than the second half, typical of this matchup that I've seen over the past few years. But Oakland's defense was holding up pretty well, especially without having Baru. Now, Baru was supposed to start for this team. They were supposed to play a lot of minutes and try to, combat the huge size disadvantage that Oakland is under because Michigan State is just littered with 6'10", 6'11", 7-foot, like huge dudes, Big Ten players. So Baru was supposed to be a big help in trying to combat that and try to ease the rebounding battle, but he gets hurt during warm-up. And I didn't even know this as part of the broadcast. Me or Justin, we didn't know live during the game what happened because he must have, it was back spasms that we ended up learning, but we were, going away to prep for the game. We get something to eat, and it must have happened while we were gone because we didn't see any of it. And it wasn't until kind of halfway through the first half where we're like, wait, where's Baru? We see Allen, we see Cooper, we see, but we see Isaiah, but like, where's Baru? And it wasn't until the post-game press conference that we realized what happened. And that was a bummer. But despite that, Oakland was able to keep it to a 1-point game by the time halftime went around. Oakland had leads during the first half at times by like one, I believe like up to 3 points. It was like a 1-possession game. Oakland with the lead in certain points during that first half. And by the time the first half was done, it was 31-30, Michigan State 1-point lead. And I was getting comments from the Michigan State student broadcast behind us, from the staff that was handing us some of the papers for the timeout stats, and they were kind of giving us a look like, this isn't good. We shouldn't be losing like this. Michigan State shouldn't be, or it shouldn't. It feels like they're losing, but Michigan State was still with the lead. But everyone was starting to get nervous. And I said, when people were saying that, I responded to something to the effect of, "Can we just stop the game here? Because this is probably as good as it's gonna get. You guys can take the win, but I'm happy being this close. Okay, can we wrap it up at the first half here? Because I had a feeling of what was coming in the second half, and that ended up being the case where Michigan State, coming out into the second half, quickly built a 4-possession lead and grew it to about 20-point lead at times, and it was just, game was wrapped up right there. And I even resisted texting some of my Michigan State friends and family because it's just, I know how it goes. And the intensity that Michigan State was bringing in the second half was a lot different than that in the first half. So I'm sure it was just more of a, and it wasn't, I'm not saying it was let's let them have fun in the first, let's let Oakland have fun in the first half, and then let's try in the second half. No, I think it was just kind of like hey, you better step up or this isn't going to look good. And then they put in a lot more juice into that second half. And yeah, that ended up being the lead. About a 20-point lead was had. It would go down to about 12, but it wouldn't really get any closer than that for the rest of the game. Some great moments were had even during that. I started picking up on the vibe of the arena whenever, it was like the last few minutes of the game when Nick Sanders would come onto the court. And I noticed a buzz in the crowd. And I didn't know who Nick Sanders was, but I could tell just by looking at the stat sheet that, he's only played 7 minutes. He's only attempted 1 field goal all season. So I had a feeling like, this, is going to be a feel-good story for this guy to get a shot, because when they were trying to feed him the ball in the corner for a 3, and the crowd was losing their mind every time. I realized only after that it was Barry Sanders' son, and that, being a lot of the reason for the buzz. And once I looked him up a little bit more after the game, I realized, oh yeah, he looks exactly like Barry. He looks exactly like Barry. But it was the last few minutes of the game. His first corner 3 was no good. But the second one, everyone lost their mind. I mean, it's supposed to be an Oakland home game when they play at the Palace or at Little Caesars Arena, but it's not the case. A lot more Michigan State fans are there, and they were loving it. When he made that 3, I literally just stepped. I told Justin to just let us hear the crowd. I turned the gain up on my microphone, and you just hear the crowd roar. It was awesome, which whatever that it was against Oakland. I got past that pretty quick when we were calling the game, but it just was so funny to, for Sanders to get his moment, to get a 3-pointer in Detroit. It was just such a cool moment. I was happy for the kid. But, and something else that was funny that happened, and, as the game was winding down, they were kind of panning, they had the camera in the stadium. They were going around and, taking had their shots of fans and stuff, and there was this little kid. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with a Michigan shirt on, a Michigan Wolverines shirt on, and he was picking his nose, man. He was 2 knuckles deep in that nose, and everybody within a second, it wasn't even a small buzz, hey, look at this, and then everyone started booing. No, everybody instantly started booing at this Michigan kid picking his nose at the last few seconds of the game. It was just so funny, and it just kind of added to the fun atmosphere in Little Caesars Arena that night. It was fun. There were funny moments. Michigan State would end up with their 77-58 win, and the team goes on the bus to Cleveland State right after. But I'll wrap it up with this. Moments in the post-game press conference. I referenced it before with Campy crashing Izzos and them both being in the Grinch sweaters and stuff and that kind of friendliness. But there was one moment that I will remember for the rest of my life. It is one of the funniest moments in all of the games I've called, all of the work that I've done in sports. So there was a lot of Metro Detroit media and some of the Michigan State media as well. Not as much the Oakland side, but a lot of people that weren't as familiar with Campy and who he is and what he's about. And he was asked by a young media member, a very good question of essentially, out of all the years you've been coaching, what are some of the things that you've learned over the years? And Campy is very modest when it comes to stuff like this, or at least in this answer. And he said, I'm just a basketball coach. I don't have a huge ego. Quote, my prostate is bigger than my ego. And he points to Mike Stone, who was in the media room, and he says, Stoney, you know what I'm talking about, right? We're talking about prostates here in the post game. I had to be quiet when I was in the press room, but I was losing my mind. And that was the only thing I tweeted out that night. In regards to that, I had a good serious picture of Campy with DQ, and a quote simply says, "My prostate is bigger than my ego." It was the best. Campy is just the best. I can't get enough of him. I'm just so happy that I'm able to cover Oakland while he's still very much into his career. I'm happy to be there at the same time as Campy, man. He is an absolute joy to talk to and to cover. He's the best, and we got a good picture with him too. Me and Justin that I have up on Instagram as well. But Campy's just the best, dude. I love that guy. But either way, looking into the box score, a big spotlight was put onto DQ Cole, who had 5 made threes in the first half, and he would end the game with 17 points. Much more action in the first half than the second. But Malcolm Christie also making himself known. He was starting to wear big old goggles after being poked in the eye, either in practice or at some point. This was the first time that we saw him in those tinted goggles. He would fire 4 3-pointers out of 9 attempts for a 15-point performance, 5 of 10 from the floor, made a free throw as well to get him to that 15 points. But it was very nice to see Malcolm Christie get things going from the 3. But we'll talk more about that in the following game. So that wraps up for Michigan State. And we'll get now to the Cleveland State game. So the way the schedule worked out for Oakland was they had the Michigan State game on Tuesday, and they had to go right from Little Caesars Arena, essentially, from the locker room, and drive down to Cleveland. So they would wake up in Cleveland to be able to get at least one day of practice in before they face the Vikings on that Thursday. So 2 games in 48 hours was a schedule for Oakland, and they would be on the road at Cleveland State at the Wolstein Center, a place where Oakland has not performed well in the past few years, and there was not one that would change this year. It was not something that would change this year. 92-75 was a loss for Oakland in the Wolstein Center. As I mentioned in the game preview last week, is Cleveland State is basically a more, or I should say, a slightly better version of Oakland at that point. They were the best defense in the Horizon League, with Oakland being second place in terms of points allowed per game. And they were 10th in the Horizon League in scoring, where Oakland was 11. So you basically had 2 very similar teams, with Cleveland State a little bit on the more cutting edge of that kind of team. And one thing that I was recognizing was, could this be a Jason Woodrich revenge game for Oakland? No, it wasn't. And I think we're starting to see Jason Woodrich's role change when it comes to his role on Oakland. We'll get into that in a little bit. But for now, we'll go to the game flow part of it. And as expected, when you got the two best defensive and two worst scoring teams in the league, it did take a little bit for the scoring to get started, about 3 minutes until a first field goal was made. But as that game was going on, you realize that Malcolm Christie, the fire that he was throwing, the flame that he was throwing at Little Caesars Arena carried over into Cleveland as he would continue his hot streak. He would end the game with 5 made threes out of 12 attempted for 19 points, 7 of 14 from the floor with no free throws, all of that purely from the field. DQ Cole would also chip into that three-point shooting as well, 4 made threes out of 13 attempts, and he would be 8 of 19 from the floor for a game-high 22 points, a Oakland-high 22 points. So those two guys were putting in a lot of work. Alan Mukeba, 10 points, 12 rebounds for a double-double on that night. But, some of the box score highlights, but it was close in the first half, essentially. They were kind of trading back and forth when it comes to the lead, but a 17-5 Cleveland State run in the last 5 minutes of the first half would give them the lead going into halftime, and the Vikings would sail into the sunset with that lead. Can't be said to Neil at halftime that they, quote, had no energy, and, quote, they're killing the zone, and it's like we're playing the zone for the first time. That was the halftime interview. And the game would get out of hand pretty quickly. And from there, Oakland allowing 92 points to one of the worst offenses in the Horizon League. Cleveland State only scoring 69 points per game, and they score 92 at home. Against Oakland, it's not good. And it wasn't a good showing. And they would end up having 2 players over 20 points, and one of them had 37. It was Tevin Smith, who was 3 of 7 from deep, who was 14 of 22 from the floor with 5 offensive rebounds, 6 in total, 2 blocks, 2 steals, and like I said, 37 points. The dude was unstoppable. And also, Taj Stavetsky was 6 of 8 from 3. This guy, I believe Neil was saying on the broadcast, and I looked it up after, that I think he only came into that game shooting 28% from 3, and he was 6 of 8 for 20 points in that game. And Chase Robinson was 5 of 10 from the floor, 2 of 4 from 3, 6 assists, and 14 points. Cleveland State had their best night against Oakland, no doubt about it, and that puts Oakland down in a 1-2 conference hole. One last note for this game against Cleveland State. The most shocking stat out of all of those that I was reading to you before for Cleveland State, they had 0 turnovers in the entire first half. And they would only end up with 3 turnovers by the time, with a few garbage time turnovers with some of the bench players in. Cleveland State did not turn the ball over. The zone was not effective in getting those turnovers, and it would end up being a 3 turnover game for Cleveland State and a 14 turnover game for Oakland. It did not look good. And I don't know if it was because of the quick turnaround or what was going on, but that was a poor showing in the Wolstein Center. It's something that's unfortunately a trend for Oakland at this point. And like I said, it puts them in a 1-2 conference hole. But it's not all bad news this week for the Oakland Golden Grizzlies, as they are now in the Hawaiian Airlines Diamond Head Classic in Maui, in Honolulu, Hawaii, which I'm starting to learn the pronunciation for. It's not Hawaii, it's Hawaii. Anyway, that's not important. But they would start off in this game, and now Oakland was invited to this Diamond Head Classic, one of the most famous midseason, one of the famous was MTE, in college basketball. Oakland was invited to this. It wasn't something that they had to beg and pay for. They were invited in off the momentum of last year's March Madness run, and they would face Loyola Chicago as their first matchup in this tournament. This one being, I believe, the third game in 5 days with a 15-hour flight added on top of that. So Oakland is running on fumes here. However, this ended up being, regardless of Oakland's involvement in it, this was a great basketball game. This was great television. This was great entertainment. I had a lot of fun watching it, regardless of my obligation to cover it here for the GioMoShow. So kind of previewing and setting the stage for you guys, Loyola Chicago. If you guys remember Sister Jean and Loyola Chicago's Final Four run a few years ago, it's that team. It's those Ramblers. They are the reigning Atlantic 10 champions. Like, this is a good basketball program. This isn't, some washed up program. Like, this is high quality basketball. And in addition to that, they are coached by Drew Valentine, which I know a lot of you Oakland fans would recognize the name. He is the winningest player in Oakland University history, played under Campy, went to the tournament twice with Oakland, so he is a historic figure in Oakland basketball, and he's going up his old man head coach Greg Campy in Honolulu, Hawaii. It's a great storyline for this game, and ended up giving a lot more juice to a juicy game. So for this one, I won't go through as much of the flow of the game. I'll give you guys the final sequence. But the biggest headline for this one is Malcolm Christie, for now the third game in a row, is still hot after starting the season ice cold. This is the third game in a row where Christie had at least 4 3-pointers made, and this one would end up being a career high for his time here at Oakland. He had 6 made threes out of 15 attempts and had 20 total points. That is a season high for Malcolm Christie. Alan Mukeba, also 20 points, also a season high for him in his time at Oakland. 2 20-point Golden Grizzlies against the reigning Atlantic 10 champions in Hawaii. It had great games going on, both complementing each other, where Allen would get things going on the inside and open up Christie from the outside. And then Christie was too hot from the outside, leaving the inside open for Mukeba. It's just a wonderful relationship between the two. Baru got involved in the action as well. Baru would end up with 8 rebounds and 6 points, 7 offensive rebounds out of the 8 that he grabbed. But I say all of that, and I don't want to mention the final score just yet in case you guys didn't see it. But if you did, that means you're a good fan. That means you know. But if you haven't, then I'm going to give you guys the story. So the final sequence. This one was such an exciting way to end the game, and I'll detail it for you guys. So Oakland had a 10-point lead with about 2.5 minutes left to go. 2 minutes and 32 seconds in the game. They were up by 10, 60-70 over the Loyola Chicago Ramblers. And when all Oakland had to do was, for those final 2.5 minutes, when all they had to do was just keep pace like they have been doing the whole game, they couldn't do it. They were ice cold. They were shut out in those final 2 minutes and 32 seconds. Loyola Chicago went on an 11-0 scoring run to gain the 1-point lead with 5 seconds left. It was 71-70, Ramblers with the lead, 5 seconds left. Oakland was begging to lose this game with turnovers and bad shots and just poor offensive decision making. They did everything for this game to go up in flames in a Drew Valentine victory. And Campy said this in the postgame as well. He said, "We did everything to lose that game." And on top of that, with 1 minute and 32 seconds left, I mentioned Alan Mukeba. He had 20 points for a season high and a career high for his time at Oakland. But with a minute 32 seconds left, he fouled out of the game. We were down our best player in the final 90 seconds of the game. And DQ had 4 fouls and was not doing so well in those last few possessions, missing a jumper and missing the only free throw that Oakland missed that entire game. It was with the final seconds left, DQ missed a free throw. So nothing is going right for Oakland in these final 2 minutes and 32 seconds. So Loyola Chicago has the 1-point lead with 5 seconds left to go. Oakland has the ball under the basket, ready for inbound. Jalen Jones is on the baseline. He's looking, and he goes for a low pass to Baru, who's cutting right in front of him towards the corner. Baru is covered very well, and he bobbles the pass, and he's fumbling for it, and he skids out towards the corner, not quite at the corner, but it would be a long two. He picks it up, and knowing the clock's going, just jumps up, turnaround jump shot is way short. And I'm looking at it like it's the worst shot that I've ever seen in my life. However, even though it wasn't close to the basket, it was close to Isaiah Jones, who was right underneath the basket. And with the final seconds ticking down, he picks it up and lays it in with 0.2 seconds left. Oakland gets the 1-point lead back with the final 0.2 seconds left, leaving Loyola Chicago with no time left to even do a Hail Mary pass from baseline to baseline. The buzzer sounds, and Oakland comes out victorious, surviving the comeback from the Ramblers, and they move on to the semifinals against Oregon State. That's going to be played Monday, 8 o'clock, which is yesterday for you guys, but they end up surviving and winning in one of the greatest wins that the Horizon League has in this season, in an exciting fashion as well. Island time is Isaiah time. Whew. I was losing my mind those last 2 minutes, man. I was losing my mind. I couldn't believe the shots that were being taken. I couldn't believe the turnovers, and I was similarly frustrated as Campy was in that time, where it just looked like it was destined for the comeback to be completed for the Ramblers, but not so. So a lesson was learned, and moving on are the Golden Grizzlies. Like I mentioned, Malcolm Christie and Alan Mukeba led the Golden Grizzlies with 20 points each, both career highs at the last time I'll say it. Oakland was also 9 of 10 from the free throw line, and in that last moment I mentioned DQ missed the free throw. That was the only one Oakland missed during that game. Mukeba was 6 of 6 from the line. Christie was 2 of 2, and Jalen Jones made the only one required of him. But either way, it's a win, it's a wash, you learn from it, and it's fine. You just don't, it's a much better way to learn from your mistakes. So with one of the best wins of the Horizon League, only challenged by Wright State's win over Princeton in the non-conference, or in the earlier non-conference part, Oakland is set at 7th place in the Horizon League with a 1-2 conference record, but now a 4-7 regular season record. Neither of which look pretty, but Oakland now at full strength. Campy mentioned this in the postgame as a big point, is that this is the first game that we played at full strength with Isaiah, Baru, Allen, Christie, everybody was healthy. So it was the first game at full strength, and he says they're 1-0 at full strength. I'll buy it. I'm into it, sure. Sounds a lot better, no doubt, but hey, I'll roll with it. That's fine. So Oakland currently 7th place in the league, and like I mentioned, I'm recording this Monday afternoon. They'll be playing Oregon State in the semifinals of the Maui Invitational, or of the... Oh, I'm sorry, Diamond Head Classic. I say Maui Invitational. It's the Diamond Head Classic is what the whole thing is called. But either way, they'll be playing Oregon State, and they will be playing then after on Christmas Day, Nebraska or Hawaii. We'll see how it all ends up. All of it will be broadcasted on ESPN2, as well as the Odyssey app, where you can hear Neil Rule on the sideline in Hawaii, covering the Golden Grizzlies as he always does. My personal recommendation, if you guys really want to enjoy the broadcast, the national broadcast does a great job with Oakland. I love seeing them on the graphics. I love seeing the halftime table talking about Oakland, talking about the disruption that the zone creates, and I love seeing it on the national stage and of national experience, of national people, I should say, talking about Oakland. That's a lot of fun. But my recommendation for watching these games, I do it for all the away games, is I have the TV feed up and I line it up with the radio feed. I find that to be the perfect medium. I don't need to see Cleveland State's 1972 co-conference champion tennis team coming back at halftime. I'm not interested in seeing that, but the radio broadcast gives you that kind of Oakland version of the game, a lot more info in regards to the Golden Grizzlies on that. So that's my recommendation for how I watch these games. I find it to be much more interesting. And also I'm the radio guy. I know I like seeing like what's being called and how it's called. Like that's also just me. So if that's not your cup of tea and you like listening to the neutral broadcast and quote neutral broadcast, that's your prerogative. I like it with the radio broadcast. Anyway, We've been going a long time with the men's team. We got the women's team to clean up to finish out this segment of the GioMoShow, this edition of the GioMoShow here on Christmas Eve. We'll take a little break here, and then we'll talk about women's basketball, their second Horizon League matchup against Robert Morris, and then a non-conference trip to Indiana University. We'll be right back on the GioMoShow. We'll clean it up with women's basketball and send you guys on your merry way here on Christmas Eve. And we're back here on the GioMoShow. Final segment would be our women's basketball coverage of the week. I know I said I would save you guys some time and get you guys out of here early for the holiday, but it's just there's a lot to talk about, and we're running at about regular time here with only men's and women's basketball. So, in their first game without Coach Tungate, who I've mentioned in the past couple of weeks has retired due to medical purposes, which was much unfortunate to see, but moving forward, it is Deanna Richard as the interim head coach as Oakland begins their search for their next head coach. But in the meantime, Wednesday, December 18th, they went to Moon Township, Pennsylvania to face the Robert Morris Colonials, who were predicted last place in the Horizon League at the preseason poll. 11th place is where they stood. Going into the game, they were 1-1 in conference play, but this game would be much closer and much more competitive than you would think for a team that was predicted to be last place. Getting into the game flow, the teams would stay within one possession of each other for much of the first quarter, but the last 3 minutes would go scoreless. Oakland would have the 2-point lead after the first quarter, 10-8 over Robert Morris, and there's going to be a lot of lead changes in this, so buckle up. So Robert Morris would then get the lead themselves with a small run to go up 12-10, but Danny Grimm would land a three-pointer to give Oakland back the 1-point lead, and they would grow that lead to as much as 5. But Robert Morris, just before halftime, they weren't done yet. They were going to go down before the half. They would end up landing a three themselves with 8 seconds left in the half, and they would walk into halftime with their own 1-point lead going into halftime. So already we're going back and forth, both teams fighting, and it's all staying within about 5 points of each other. It's all within a couple of possessions. So we would open up the second half. Liana Baxter would land a three to give Oakland back their lead, but Robert Morris would go back and forth and get the lead back themselves, and the Colonials would raise that lead to as much as 9 points, the largest margin in the game. They would end up ending the third quarter up by 4, and Oakland would continue the fight. They would get their lead back and make the shots needed to stay on top and keep things afloat within a couple of possessions, but Robert Morris was not giving up either. They were doing the same to keep it within those couple of possessions like I've been mentioning. In the last 2 minutes and 42 seconds of the game, it was tied at 50. Oakland and Robert Morris tied at 50, trying to get their lead in the Horizon League standings with this game. Danny Grimm would end up scoring and making a free throw to make it now a 2-possession lead with 70 seconds left, a minute 10 seconds left in the game, and Robert Morris would end up scoring to get it within 1 possession with 48 seconds left, and that's it. Oakland would hold the score as it is, and they would walk out victorious 55-53 against Robert Morris. No scoring in the final 48 seconds of play. Teams would exchange steals, there would be turnovers, and great defensive rebounds, but nobody scored. And Oakland holds on to their 2-point lead to win it in Moon Township. Getting into the box score, Maddie Skorupski, of course, leads the Golden Grizzlies in scoring with 19 points, making 3 of 4 from beyond the arc and 8 of 16 from the field, along with 4 rebounds and 4 assists. Danny Grimm would be a 8-point scorer, along with Serenity Roberts-Adams, both scoring 8 points. And Serenity Roberts-Adams, a freshman on the team this year. I know the team's young, but I usually don't expect the freshman to get a lot of minutes, but she is very productive for the Golden Grizzlies team in terms of rebounding, and she gets points as well, but the rebounding crown would go to Madison Royal Davis, who had 11 on the game, 6 of which were offensive rebounds, all adding up to an Oakland win. They are now 2-0 in Horizon League standings and currently stand at 4th place in the conference. Standing above Oakland is Cleveland State at 3-0, followed by Detroit Mercy at 2-0 and Purdue Fort Wayne at 3-0. They occupy the top 3 spots. And in the 2 spots below Oakland, in 5th and 6th place is Green Bay and Youngstown State, both with 2-1 conference records, so it's looking close so far. Oakland benefiting from only playing 2 games, but still undefeated in conference play. They will continue their season when they play Northern Kentucky on the 29th. That'll be next Sunday, and then they return home at the top of the new year, January 3rd and 5th. They will be playing Cleveland State and Purdue Fort Wayne. Like I mentioned, 2 of the top 3 teams in the Horizon League so far. Those will be tough matchups to open up 2025, but that is the task at hand for the Oakland Golden Grizzlies. And I know I'm sounding like I'm not going to talk about the Indiana University game in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm not really, because these Big Ten games for the women's team, like I know the men's team, they do a similar fashion, but it's not the same kind of competitiveness. So just real quick, 90-55 was the final score against the Indiana Hoosiers. And in that game, Danny Grimm would lead in scoring with 16. Macy Smith would have 12 points, and Maddie Skorupski would have 11. It's non-conference. It wasn't super competitive, so I'll save you guys some time here and just mention the final score. 90-55, Indiana with the win, and Oakland will move on into conference play. Northern Kentucky on the 29th, and Cleveland State and Purdue Fort Wayne on the 3rd and the 5th. So that will wrap it up for us here on the GioMoShow. We talked only about men's and women's basketball, but spent a whole lot of time doing it. Next week, we'll be covering the Oakland Golden Grizzlies, as the men's team will be finishing out their Diamond Head Classic against Oregon State, and then whoever they play in the final game on Christmas Day. And then we'll preview their matchup with John Calipari in the Arkansas Razorbacks. Revenge from last year's March Madness opening round. The return of Calipari against the Golden Grizzlies. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll see how the women's team finishes out the year against Northern Kentucky, all here on the GioMoShow, your home for all Golden Grizzlies sports, the only show that covers the Oakland Golden Grizzlies each and every week. So we appreciate you guys stopping by. Next week, we'll do a little bit of New Year's perspective and recap of the show. We'll say all of our thank yous and Happy New Year's. But for now, on Christmas Eve, we wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays for all those who celebrate every holiday. And we appreciate you tuning into the GioMoShow. More Golden Grizzlies coming up next Tuesday right here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Giovanni Mosheri, and we'll see you next week.